Good morning, Katie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm joined by political reporter Katie Honan. We're just going to get right into it, Katie. What are the hot topics this morning?
Well, we're recording on a Wednesday, and the November budget modification is coming today. That's our understanding. And we're going to see where some of that money is going with the mayor. I know this time last year he was talking about more budget cuts, and all the agencies were reining in a lot of their money to fund the asylum seekers, as he was saying. But it kind of was the latest. It wasn't the first time you had this face-off with the mayor and the council, but there are differing opinions of how much money the city actually has. So that is what we are kind of looking at, where that money is going to go. I know there was a push to put more money in something like the Parks Department and other agencies. Other than that, I mean, again, we continue to ask the mayor about his conversations with Trump and what New York City is going to do when we have a new president and any kind of changes with that. The other hot topics, that's kind of the two things I'm thinking of, at least today, that anything can happen.
Katie, what do you think of the comments from President of Executive Director of DC 37, Henry Garrido, related to OMB, considering that this, budget mod is coming out?
I think there is some truth to this real delays I've been working on a story about delayed payments to nonprofits, and everyone I've spoken to, it's catastrophic. That's a word someone used. The lack of money they're getting, tens of millions of dollars in some cases that they're owed, and it's staffing. So there's clearly some backlog, and, as a union leader, you're advocating for your members, and part of that is getting more members. So if there's an inability for the city to hire these crucial roles to then pay out nonprofits who are doing a crucial service to fill the gaps that the city won't do, it's the circle of we need more people, we need more money, and it is we don't have enough people working at an agency. There's this domino effect of problems.
Katie, what's your take on the Trump election and the mayoral race? What did it do to the race? What are some of the things in terms of, again, I keep talking about progressive and that label and left, and people talking about moderates now.
Right.
And the outcomes across the board between, folks even in the Bronx voting Trump, right? In numbers that have been exponentially higher than they've been in the past. What do you think? What does this mean for the mayoral race?
I'm still trying to think exactly, because when I think of the mayoral race, I think of the individual people in it, right? I think of it almost two ways, right? The issues that matter, and then the players involved, right? If you're thinking like it's a play, right? What's the theme of the play, and who are the actors in it? And I mean, the presidential election was so fascinating, and I listened to the Scott Stringer interview, and this idea of people turning away, even if they are longtime Dems, even if they may vote more left in a local race, what attracted them to President-elect Trump? What was he saying that they were listening to? So I was interested to see a candidate like Zoran Mamdani, who's a socialist, and stuff he was putting out, or those issues that could people look past, even if some people I know in certain parts of the city, the word socialism is not a word you want to use based on, country of origin and where people are coming from. But are there issues that he can bring up that will be attractive to people? Free buses, health, childcare, issues like that. Or are people thinking of a more moderate candidate who's maybe focused more on public safety? Could someone be even more attracted to a Curtis Lewa, who's the Republican candidate so far, at least the more prominent one, of, the city is in disarray, we need help. Will people do... I was very fascinated by what Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez did, this idea of, okay, you voted for me, and I looked at the map, people in my district also voted for Trump, and why? And people's answers, it's weird. If you look at it, you're reminded that people don't make sense, right? People vote against their own interests all the time. They're contradictory with what they believe and what they say. But seeing that really play out in an Instagram video of people saying why they liked Trump, you could point out to them, well, you voted for Trump because of XYZ, but in reality, it's ABC. They don't believe that. So there was that real disconnect between what people are feeling and what the data shows. I think we saw it in 2021. I know the mayor often repeats, I was talking about public safety and I won. He really has a hang up over Andrew Yang. I guess so did Scott Stringer. I think he was the only candidate that Scott Stringer brought up from 2021. But I'm still waiting to see how all of this will play out. I think a lot of candidates need to raise more money. The money plays a big role. And anything can happen between now and June in that Democratic primary. Could the mayor continue to be mayor? Could there all be, again with Trump, could there be changes in his his federal corruption case, and that changes who people vote for in June? I don't know, but I view
what did Trump's election mean for two folks now? Attorney General Tish James, who was being mentioned, and former Governor Andrew Cuomo.
Yeah.
What is, again, two potentials, right?
Yeah.
Possibles.
I found that in people I spoke with, the Tish James felt a little like fan fiction-y, or the possibility of her running, because she seemed pre-election like the reigning queen of New York. Here she got Trump, right? A lot of people have tried, and she got him on the big case. I don't think it makes her run any more than I thought before. I think maybe she'll continue, although, I mean, I don't know what this new president, his lawyer was already insulting her and threatening her as soon as Trump was elected. And for Andrew Cuomo, I think it might lead him more into running. But again, he's someone who for months we've heard he's going to run, and I haven't seen any forward motion. And we're kind of getting, I mean, how late can you run? You know, there are deadlines, right? But then also practically speaking, how late can you enter this race? And actually, obviously he has name recognition, but I think what he'll have to do is sort of reclaim his name from whatever people think of him. You know, he has a core group of supporters, I don't want to use the term Cuomo-sexuals, but obviously his staff, his internal staff, and the people who really truly believe he got a raw deal from Attorney General Tish James. He was a great leader. He resigned too soon. Why did he pushed out by all these other factors? But there are two people. I never felt that the Tish James running for mayor, from people I spoke to, was really realistic based on her standing as Attorney General of New York. I know when she briefly ran for governor, it kind of was a bit of a failure to launch, and there really wasn't much action with it. And with Cuomo, in a weird way, I think sometimes he likes people talking about him running, but I don't know if he actually wants to run for mayor and be mayor. I'm trying to picture him coming into City Hall every day.
Katie, two major policy things that are happening now and what they mean for the principals. Congestion pricing for Governor Hochul. What does it mean in terms of her standing, and what are your views and what are your takes as to how it's being potentially rolled out, announced, and the changes, and what that means big picture for her?
Yeah. I think we can go back to 2022. It was pretty clear that we had a very unpopular governor, almost losing to Lee Zeldin in a overwhelmingly Democratic state. She was doing these last chance in Woodside with AOC trying to really get the vote, and even that, it felt a little desperate. So these last chance movements, and I don't know how much more popular she's gotten when she's to run again in 2026. With congestion pricing, I do believe, you know, I've seen these studies, there's sort of this valley of unpopularity, but I think once it rolls out, you know, maybe it won't affect, maybe it will if it really does reduce traffic. I think now the estimate is 13% reduction in Midtown. I don't know what that would look like on the street to the general, to the regular person on the street. I think they probably expect all the traffic. I think they want like COVID era traffic to feel it's worth it. Yeah, I actually think the pause that she did in June, it was June, was just so bizarre. And it was so political. And then her insistence that it wasn't political when it clearly was, to try to salvage some House seats and save her popularity. I think regular New Yorkers who are not that tuned into politics, they see something like that and they see how blatantly political it is. And even though politics happen all the time and people make deals and do these things, that one was so blatant. I think it really resonated with regular people. Like even people who don't want congestion pricing. They're like, I don't want congestion pricing, but you already put the cameras up to nearly, $500 million, I think. What was the point of that? It showed a weird lack of leadership and governance to just, in the late hour, and the next day I spoke to some people on her team and they were like, oh, well, it was leaked to the press. And as a reporter, it's like, grow up. Do better at your job. Don't get mad that I got leaked to the press. We were doing our job. Sorry that I got out. Sorry you didn't tell the MTA board and Jan Lieber before it was in, Politico and the New York Times.
City of Yes and Mayor Adams.
That's
again, 421A or the new iteration, and just the conversation it's constant, right?
Yeah.
Rent, housing. That's the major rent guidelines, but all these other things, right, that all lead to housing. What does it mean? And obviously with an upcoming vote.
The mayor has obviously been in support of City of Yes, although I think he hasn't been as in front of it as some of his staffers are. First Deputy Mayor Marie Torres Springer, a lot of the advocacy groups. The reality is, I think especially some of the advocate groups, really tried to paint people who were opposed to City of Yes as just, you're all just NIMBYs, you hate big housing, all this kind of stuff. And of course there's some of that. There's NIMBYism, there's all this stuff. But I've spoken to people who are opposed to it, and they're just like, look, I see new developments getting built in my neighborhood, and the rent isn't any lower. I see there's a new building on my corner and a one bedroom's $4,200, and who can afford that, right? And that's purely anecdotal, but that unfortunately is what people look at. I think ultimately what they're trying to do, obviously, is build more housing, which is desperately needed. It's going to vote, I believe, next week in the council. Everything I'm hearing is it's going to pass, so they'll get what they want. Again, I think some of the people who were really opposed to it, I don't know if they could have been convinced if there was more conversations. They went to all the community boards, they went to all these meetings in trying to explain their worst fears, the worst case scenario. Like, I don't believe it's going to suddenly change what your neighborhood looks like so quickly. But then I've also spoken to people who say, I've never seen such a wholesale citywide zoning change, and that scares them. But then the proponents of it say, no, we need that. It's bad that we haven't had this major zoning change in decades, and it might seem different, or you're afraid of it because of the novelty of it, because we haven't had it, but it's been needed the whole time. So we'll see. I don't know what kind of concessions will be in, if there are concessions with this council vote. I think you'll see the people who you expect to vote against it. But again, I think there are some legitimate concerns about, I saw this in Long Island City, right? The history of Long Island City, at least over the last 20 something years, before 9/11 was zoned to be commercial, so they rezoned it, and then 9/11, no one wanted to put office buildings in Long Island City, so you build residential, and what you have are real infrastructure issues. Overcrowded schools, and District 30 is one of the most overcrowded in the city, even something as simple as plumbing and that kind of thing. So that's the concerns people have.
Katie, what does the Trump election do for two other Brooklyn Dems, Hakeem Jeffries, let's start there, and Chuck Schumer? Again, two leaders of the party, one minority leader, close to being majority leader in Congress, and the other was the majority leader in the Senate, and what this means for the two of them post Trump's election.
I'll start with Senator Schumer. I guess I do both at the same time. I think they need to really look at their party and the role they play in it, that they've fallen so far from favor from their own registered voters. Why did so many people who were registered as Democrats go to President Trump? I spoke to someone this weekend who's like, on paper, Donald Trump is a very beatable candidate, yet it wasn't even in some places close. I think a lot of people thought, the election day, maybe it'll be close. We'll go into what we had in 2020. We'll have to wait. No, it was called. I think by 10:30, it was a done deal. And I think a lot of people in the establishment, the establishment Dems, there is justifiable criticism of how they're running their party, how they're talking to voters, how they're appealing to people. You're looking at the people who they perhaps took for granted as a base of voters, who are now both locally and nationally shifting to the right. Why is that? And, the coverage I read out of DC is who's going to be it's like this real, palace intrigue of who's going to be in charge, when, I don't know, are they really actually talking about the issues that real New Yorkers care about? And I hate that, because that's what I hate the use. Let me go back, because, that's something that former Mayor de Blasio would always use, and current Mayor Adams, whenever we talk about how he got arrested and indicted, he's like, real New Yorkers don't care about that. So I use that with a little asterisk but I do think there's something legitimate about what do the voters care about?
Katie, we're going to wrap this up, but I have 3 more questions. Okay. And I'll let you go. First one, best day at the highlight of your job, the best day you've ever had in your current job.
Okay.
Broke a story, right? Something that you were like, wow, received an award for journalism and reporting.
So I've been
you were like, wow, I got this right. I picked the right profession and the right career. And
I'm trying to, now I should have thought about this before. I've been at the city, the nonprofit news site, the city.nyc. If you're rich, the city.nyc/donate, since August of 2021. And, oh God, now I'm free. I'm blanking on I will tell a story from a decade ago that I loved. It seems like a cop-out because now I'm blanking on the stories that I've written for the city. I worked at DNA Info, a long-lost local news site that I loved working at, and it was a story about a 14-year-old girl who jumped into a moving car after her phone was stolen and beat up the driver. So I was retelling someone asked me what my favorite story was. I go, that story. And that girl is now probably in her early 20s. But that to me was real local reporting. I mean, at the city, what I love, I'll give an example. This summer, we do a lot of hard-hitting stuff, investigations. We did a lot of stories about Winnie Greco. We did a lot of stories about former deputy mayors, like someone like Phil Banks and that kind of stuff. So I do really love doing those investigations and the kind of the hard-hitting stories that create change and do all that stuff. But this summer, we did a summer newsletter. It sort of came from like my mom. She loved DNA Info. She's like, God, all the stories on your website are so depressing. It's like Greg Smith writing about NYCHA, all this stuff. So we did a summer newsletter. We picked up a lot of subscribers, which was great. And it was just fun stuff. I wrote about the guy who maintains the boardwalk on Coney Island, the Department of Building Elevators inspectors who inspect the carnival rides. Stuff like that was really fun, and I loved doing that. So I love being like an in-your-face reporter. Because it's fun.
No.
I love, challenging
I would have
people.
never known.
But at the same time, I love writing just about regular New Yorkers. And I guess I do sound like Eric Adams. I mentioned regular New Yorkers twice in this.
Worst day. Someone beat you to a story. You had a couple of leads. You lost, right? Or whatever, the equivalent thereof.
Yeah, I mean, no one wants to get beat. And I will say at the city, we are, I don't know if it's the nonprofit in us, but our editors are not crazy, like, you got beat, oh my God. We're not crazy about that because we think, what is serving the reader? The reader doesn't care if you got it really first. I will say when I've made mistakes in stories, and again, this isn't a specific day, I can't pull up a calendar, but when you have a mistake, I'll tell you the mistake. I did a newsletter blurb. So just for if I write a story, I can change it online and that's that. But a newsletter blurb, it's in your email and that's it. And I wrote about the new bin in Sean Abreu's district, and I had the wrong district for him. People read it, no one noticed. And getting that email from the sanitation spokesperson was like, hey, Katie, read your blurb. Councilmember Abreu actually doesn't represent the Bronx, which I knew, but I don't know why in my head. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I wanted to it was so early and you couldn't go back. You can issue a correction online, issue a correction to the next newsletter. But I wanted to. So yeah, that was bad. It's the type of stuff that makes you want to quit.
Wow. Katie, let's wrap it with the Red Storm, St. John's. They're undefeated. They're ranked.
Yeah.
Last year they deserved to be a tournament.
They were robbed.
Team.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were considering, and I mean Patino has definitely righted the ship. In this new world with NIL and players getting paid. This is my prediction. I think Sweet 16.
Okay.
I think the Kadari Richmond not being a 3-point shooter is going to come. There's going to be a time, again, as with scouting, that's going to turn into a real problem for them and how people adjust. Just saying.
Yeah.
Because he's there, right? He's the go-to. RJ Luis has stepped up big time. Simeon Wilshire. I think Sweet 16. What do you think?
I would agree with you. And I will say, I used to follow all these St. John's accounts on Twitter. I had to unfollow because the negativity would absolutely kill me. You're right that St. John's was robbed last year. Not just St. John's, the whole Big East. Mm-hmm. We can get into this anti-New York City East Coast bias. Mm-hmm. CBS wanted their own horrible leagues to get in. And, Seton Hall in particular last year was robbed.
Oh, yeah.
The NIL is helping huge. Mike Rapoli. I'm a St. John's. If you're listening.
Yeah, Vitamin Water. Mike Rapoli from Vitamin Water.
If you're listening to the Perez Notes, Mike, I'm also a St. John's alum. Give to the city.nyc/donate. And Patino really has brought in this new energy of, it's hard. I've never been a coach, but you're trying to, at the end of the day, we look at them like they're adults. I look at them now, I'm like, I could be their mom, right? They're kids. They're like kids playing basketball. But he really has established this in a way that is funny, but, you know, makes him run extra laps, which they're not doing. And he really was focused on the fundamentals. I actually think someone like Brady Dunlap, that kid is a shooter. And I think he can make up where, and he was young, and he's even said, I was reading Zach Braziller's coverage. He was saying, you know, like last year he got hot a couple games and then he got cocky, which of course, because you're 18, that's going to happen. And they're playing Baylor this week in the Bahamas. We'll see how they do with that. I think there's this real need, but I think even St. John's fans, if they even make it to the Sweet 16, they still won't be happy.
So here's the other thing I would say, and we'll wrap here. One, I think that in order to coach at St. John's, to be a city, just here in New York City, you have to have it's a personality job as well. We saw it with Lou Carnesecca many years ago. Yeah. And I feel we haven't had it. Well, Mike Jarvis he had good players, Elite Eight. But if you notice the other thing about St. John's and their success historically in my lifetime, there has to be a component of players from the tri-state area 100%. And big-time personality. Yeah. That combination. Walter Berry, Chris Mullin, Mark Jackson, Jason Williams.
Ron
Artest then, right? Yeah. Eric Barkley. And then now, Jaden Glover, Jersey. Simeon Wilcher, Jersey. Yeah. And Kadari Richmond, Brooklyn. Yeah. So it's sort of that. Those are the two things, and I think they have that now. So we'll see. We'll see.
If I could, one
more.
The thing that's difficult, and I went to St. John's. I lived on campus for 2 years. Moved home. You know, drove. I visited. I call them real colleges, right? And you know that movie version of a college. Mm-hmm. Friends of mine worked at in Columbia, Missouri, so we went a couple years ago. That's like this. The whole town lives and dies for the college. Mm-hmm. You know, when UConn would come to campus, I used to work campus security when I was a student for the women's games. I mean, they take buses.
It was a home game.
It was
for UConn.
Yeah, for you. The fans would take buses from.
They travel well.
They travel, so you don't have that at St. John's because it's a school in a city that doesn't really give a crap about you because there's a million other things going on. And that's why there's a benefit to that because you're in the greatest city in the world, the biggest city in the country. You get to play in these big stage. So I think some players maybe they want to go to like a Duke where, I mean, when I read about those corny Duke fans, any Duke fans want to come for me, please, they camping out, they have to pass a quiz. It's like pathetic. Yeah. So that is, I think, what could be seen as a detriment for some people. You're not going to be the king. I mean, Kadari Richmond could walk down Union Turnpike, and I'm sure people aren't going to stop him for his autograph. Mm-hmm. But if he played in Duke, it would be a different story. But then you have the flip side, right? You're getting covered by national publications. You're getting on TV, and when you're winning, the city loves you. So is that benefit? I know Rick Patino's complained about the facilities, which I'm like, I don't know, they seem... Although the seats at Carnesecca are crazy, really small. But yeah, I think there's always a balance as an alum where I'm like, how much money are we actually going to spend just on athletics to appease a coach? But it is nice to win.
I would disagree with you. I think that everyone loves a winner in New York. Yeah. I remember the Yankees pre-Bernie, pre-Jeter, and Steinbrenner spending hella money, and no one would go, right? Yeah. Everyone loves a winner. Yeah. And again, I date myself. I remember when St. John's the Knicks played second fiddle when you had the sweater game with John Thompson. Yeah. You know, you had Pearl White. It was the Big East and St. John's. I mean, the Garden would rock. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't physically there, but I remember just the energy in the city. But we'll see. Katie, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
It was a fun conversation, and hopefully this won't be the last one.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, always. Thank you.
Sorry, was it too long?